It's taken 25 years to bring you my very own Wilson audio review. It's hard to believe that one of the most iconic speakers in history began its life as a modest two-way stand-mounted speaker named the Watt. Released in 1986, the Watt, also known as the Wilson Audio Tiny Tot, was designed for founder Dave Wilson's recording studio. It was a triangular-shaped speaker that housed a 1-inch inverted dome tweeter complemented by a 6.5-inch woofer. Now, a few years later, Dave, being unhappy with how the Watt sounded when paired with third-party subwoofers, went ahead and designed the Puppy, a bass enclosure housing two 8-inch woofers to flesh out the Watt's bottom end, and with it, the Watt Puppy was born. Now, the Watt Puppy remained in constant production from 1989 to 2011 before being retired, leaving behind a legacy that few speakers have ever achieved or replicated. In 2024, to celebrate Wilson Audio's 50th anniversary, the brand introduced the new Watt Puppy, showcasing a 1-inch CSC tweeter, which was originally developed for use in the Alex V, Wilson's $135,000 tower speaker. It features a 7-inch Quadramag mid-range driver positioned below the tweeter, both housed in a separate time-aligned portion of the speaker, complemented by two 8-inch woofers sourced from the more expensive Sasha V, residing in the rear-ported bass enclosure. The Watt Puppy boasts some impressive specs. They have a reported frequency response of 26 Hz to 30 kHz and a sensitivity of 89 dB with a nominal impedance of 4 ohms. Now, Wilson is transparent about letting potential customers know that the speaker can dip to below 3 ohms, meaning a capable amplifier is required for best results. Now, I tested the Wilson using the Macintosh MC312, Musical Fidelity NuVista 600.2, Marantz AMP20, and the DVLA Astra, all of which were good fits for the Watt Puppy. However, my personal favorite pairing was the Astra-Wilson combo. Since this was my first Wilson audio review, I was introduced to the full Wilson experience, which included a very personalized ordering process all the way to delivery and then final installation. Christy and I were treated no differently than any other Wilson customer. And even though the Watt Puppies reviewed here are on loan, Wilson insisted we spec the review pair so that it suited us. We were able to select everything from the color of the finish to the grill cloth and even the hardware colors. While I understand that looks are subjective, the Watt Puppy is as much an artistic and design statement as it is a sonic one. After almost a month of deliberation, no joke, we settled on the rather bold color choice of Spearmint with a Le Mans blue fabric grille and natural hardware. I must say, while the colorway we chose may not be everyone's cup of tea, these speakers are stunning to behold, and the quality of the finish and the materials is next level and fitting of a bespoke loudspeaker. The machining and construction of the speaker's crossover is unlike anything I have ever seen outside of, other Wilson speakers, of course. We waited for 3 months before receiving a call that the speakers were ready. Now, all Wilson speakers are set up and positioned on site by Wilson-trained professionals at no additional charge, a process that can take several hours to ensure the ideal end result. Once I told the installers roughly where I wanted the speakers to go, they went about their work, assembling the speakers and positioning them in my room using the Wilson way. Listening to specific test tracks, the two-man team maneuvered the speakers inch by inch until their sound locked in, resulting in a completely holographic and coherent sonic picture from top to bottom, one that could be replicated and appreciated regardless of the source material. In the end, the Watt Puppies were placed 19 inches off my front wall, measured from the rear of the speaker, 55 3/4 inches off my side wall, with 104 inches resting between them. The Watt portion of the speaker was also time-aligned to work with my specific seating distance of 147.5 inches. Now, if some of these figures sound awfully precise, that's because Wilson leaves nothing to chance, moving and fine-tuning the speaker's position a 1/4 inch at a time until everyone is satisfied. This is the Wilson way. And from this position, the Watt Puppy measured incredibly well, even reaching 20 hertz in room at my listening position, albeit at roughly 4 dB below the measurement volume of 75 dB. Meaning that for the vast majority of music and even movies, provided your room and placement allow for it, the Wilsons are capable of playing to subwoofer-like depths, requiring no additional low-end augmentation or investment, which is nice. There is some bass energy between 30 and 200 hertz, which is typical of most full-range speakers, including high-end ones like these. From approximately 300 hertz, or the low mid-range, on up to 20 kilohertz, or the highest of high frequencies, the Watt Puppy is remarkably linear. Like I said at the top, my Wilson audio journey goes back 25 years, where I first encountered the brand at a hi-fi dealer in California, the Digital Ear. It was an experience that left a lasting impression on my hi-fi psyche, though it was ultimately a demo of a pair of Watt Puppy 5.1s, which I heard at my then editor's home later that same year, that cemented the Watt Puppy as one of the best speakers I had ever heard. Driven by a combination of Meridian and Mark Levinson electronics, the Watt Puppy 5.1 sounded as close to the real thing, I'm talking real music, as anything I have ever heard, and I am including my beloved Bang & Olufsen speakers in that statement. There was no frequency, nuance, or emotion those speakers couldn't hit, and hit with the type of confidence I found difficult to replicate with passive speakers all these years later. So when I say I was nervous, even a little scared, to fire up the new Watt Puppies for the first time, I mean it, because the last thing I wanted was to be disappointed. There have only been a handful of speakers in my career that have managed to transport me to the heart and soul of a recording or event. KLIPSCH SCALA, Focal DIABLO Color Evo, the Beolab 90s, and now the new Watt Puppy. You don't so much listen to the Watt Puppy as you experience it. It epitomizes what you're supposed to get and feel when investing in the hobby at such a high level, delivering excuse-free performance across the entire frequency range regardless of what's playing, or how well or poorly it was recorded, or even the physical space. It lets you forget about whether or not your room is, quote, good enough. The only real caveat to unlocking this speaker's true potential is power. They need it. But aside from that, they are near perfect. Every aspect of the Watt Puppy's sound is effortless. Loud or soft, the speaker's speed, articulation, and sheer transparency to the source material are second to none. While the SCALA may have been a window to some of my favorite recordings, I realize that they come with a bit of fine print for some listeners, specifically those wanting to experience deep bass when listening to electronica. And while the Beolab 90 have no such issues, it is a powered all-inclusive speaker, it's not really a fair comparison. Yet, the Watt Puppy deserves to be compared. And it compares because the bass was capable of pressurizing our space in a very visceral way, but managed to retain all of its focus, detail, and speed. While the Watt Puppy doesn't have a powered built-in subwoofer, you wouldn't know it. More importantly, the raw impact and immediacy of the speaker's bass notes impressed me most. Next to the Beolab 90 or 50s, I don't think I've heard anything attack and hit down low like the Watt Puppy. And that theme of transparency continues throughout the mid-range and treble. While the speaker's measurements show a mostly linear or neutral response, I gotta tell you, there is nothing remotely dull or neutral about the Watt Puppy experience. I'm not saying these are bright speakers, far from it actually, but they're just incredibly revealing in a very natural way. Where speakers like the B&W 800 signatures may exhibit an increase in energy or output in the upper mid-range and treble, giving you the sensation of added resolution or detail at all volumes, the Watt Puppy does it by seemingly just removing itself from the equation, exhibiting a level of absolute coherence top to bottom that make it easy to forget you're listening to multiple drivers. Couple this with a dead silent cabinet and you're left with just this floating stage of sound that is completely disconnected from the speakers themselves and presented in such a way, complete with true-to-life dynamics and boundary-defying scale that is far more reminiscent of being in the room with the artist or inside the orchestra hall than back in the booth listening back through a pair of studio monitors. And while my evaluation primarily focused on two-channel or the stereo experience, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the Watt Puppy make an incredible left and right main in a home theater setup. In fact, their center imaging and intelligibility is so freaking good, the lack of a center channel was never an issue. Watching movies on the Wilson was as good as anything I've heard in our space thus far, with one exception: the Beolab 90s. I especially love that I could enjoy subwoofer-like bass without needing one hovering over my shoulder. And while the Watt Puppy speakers border on perfection, there are aspects of the ownership experience that I believe need mentioning. While I understand that not everyone moves their speakers as much as I do, you need to know that these are very heavy, very dense loudspeakers that, according to installers, need to sit on purpose-built spikes to sound their best. These are not towers that you're just going to slide or muscle out of the way. While Wilson does offer sliders that make it easier for you to move them around, they're sold separately to the tune of $1,000, which is silly considering customers have already spent nearly 40 grand with you for the speakers. Don't be a Marantz. Put the sliders in the box. Lastly, I am glad to see that Wilson has abandoned Velcro when it comes to adhering their grills, but I wish they'd use something like magnets to make removing and affixing the grills just a little bit easier. I appreciate the tooling necessary to make the metal pins to hold the grills in place, but they can be a little difficult to get on and off, which could introduce the risk of scratching or damaging their speakers if owners aren't careful. Well, the Wilsons do a great job at making you forget that other speakers exist. Believe it or not, the new Watt Puppy is actually a more affordable alternative to Bowers & Wilkins' flagship 800 Signature. For the Signature's asking price of $60,000, you could build a whole system around the Watt Puppy and still have money left over for a nice bottle of wine or whiskey. While I adored our time with the B&Ws and would have happily made the 800s mine had I had the pockets deep enough to do so, I'm actually glad I didn't pull the trigger. I prefer the Watt Puppy. I think the Wilsons sound better, are even more effortless and transparent, not to mention smaller, and far more customizable. Never mind, you get professional installation and a more personalized ownership experience. Oh, and all of this costs you less money, something you don't often get to say when it comes to discussing, cost no object loudspeakers. Focal's DIABLO Utopia Color Evo was another speaker that Christy and I both loved, and for good reason. The Evo is a fantastic speaker. The Evo's intelligibility, dynamics, and soundstage are among the best in the business. And for a bookshelf speaker, they have a surprising amount of bass, and in many situations could be a, quote, enough speaker for many without requiring additional investments in a subwoofer. And I get that comparing the Focal to the Wilson will make someone out there a little twitchy, given that the Focal is a bookshelf speaker and the Watt Puppy is a tower. Seeing as how the Focals retail now for close to 26 grand for the pair, and that doesn't include stands and maybe a sub or two for the bass heads, the Watt Puppy might not be a bad upgrade given all the added performance you get with it for potentially, less hassle. The SCALA will always hold a special place in my heart. It's a special speaker and one I wish everyone could have the opportunity to experience, especially if you like listening to piano or jazz ensembles. I mean, my God, it is brilliant. However, it is simply outclassed here. The KLIPSCH would require a significant amount of extra effort on a customer's part to bring it up to the level where it would be comparable to what Wilson provides straight out of the box. And I understand that the SCALA is half the cost, but for many listeners, especially those who want to enjoy, more bass-heavy tracks, you are getting half the performance. If cost isn't a barrier, but space is, the Wilsons are also much easier to accommodate thanks to their smaller size. Now, compared to the more advanced and fully active Beolab 90, the Watt Puppy holds its own when it comes to sound quality. That said, given its passive design, the puppies ultimately cannot do everything the 90s can. Bang & Olufsen uses features like built-in DSP and beam steering, which enable you to essentially reconfigure and revoice the 90s on the fly to suit whatever your living or listening taste may be. Moreover, if you want to experience reference subwoofer level bass, I'm talking subsonic frequencies, Wilson can't compete. And in terms of sheer scale, dynamics, and true three-dimensional sound, the 90 does take things to that higher level. But, and this is a huge but, it's gonna cost you 5 times as much to achieve it. At the end of the day, these two speakers will likely never be considered comparable by anyone but me. It's an unfortunate reflection of the divide that, still exists in the hobby, that passive versus active debate. As for how the Watt Puppy compares to the slightly smaller and less expensive Sabrina V, we're gonna have to wait and see. Now, hopefully it won't be another 20 plus years between this and my next Wilson review. Hopefully. My experience living with these speakers now for several months has shown me that there are still aspects of this hobby that transcend the analytical and are capable of striking the right emotional chords again and again. The Watt Puppy, it's not a loudspeaker you listen to in order to pick it apart. I mean, if you want to do that, just save your money and get something like a per listen. Similar to B&O in many ways, the Watt Puppy and maybe other Wilson speakers, they aren't trying to appease audiophiles, but instead are aiming for a bar that is higher, one that leaves a lot of the noise and the BS behind and instead leaves you with no doubt that what you're experiencing, better yet, what you're feeling, is what really matters. So that's it. That is my review of Wilson Audio's new Watt Puppy. What did you guys think? What did you think? I think it's pretty clear what I think, but I am very curious what your thoughts are. So let's just get the conversation going. Go ahead, leave a comment down below. In the meantime, guys, remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next video. Bye.